Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Saif, for the introduction. شكرا جدا للتقديم الجميل ده. My talk today is in English, but there is simultaneous translation for whoever needs it. And my talk is actually very simple, because as Saif was saying, I like to tell stories. And my story today takes us to a Quran Mushaf that was printed by a non-profit organization, an academic organization that is called Thesaurus Islamicus Foundation. And the aim of this foundation is to advance and to promote the culture of the history of the manuscripts. And that's why they are preserving and conserving, studying all of the intellectual and artistic elements in our heritage. And our focus today is actually on this manuscript that we have on display here, and it is a mushaf, but it is unlike any other mushaf in the market. Today in the market we see printed mushafs, a lot of them produced by renowned institutions and organizations, and even we see surfacing in the market electronic mushafs, Qur'ans, digital Qur'ans. These all rely on applications to actually give the reader or the receiver some more information. Yet, this mushaf that I am talking about is really nothing in comparison to what I am actually showing. It is something unique, and that's why we decided today to actually introduce it. The mushaf is actually the art of the mushaf, and the mushaf that we are talking about today is not this one. This one is the mushaf, an example from the mushaf of Al-Madinah. And the whole idea is that we are trying to talk about the art of the Quran, the art of the Quran mushaf. What does that mean? Because a lot of people, when they look at the mushaf, they do not know what are the components that actually form this actually mushaf. So that's why today I want to go through briefly what is the art of the mushaf, and then come back to the Quran mushaf that we are introducing today. When we talk about the art of the mushaf, we actually, the first 2 pages of the mushaf are the frontispieces. Anyone who is actually looking at any mushaf, and when you go back to your homes, look at the mushafs, you will find all of the components that I am going to talk about today. And because the art of the mushaf is unlike any other manuscript produced in and around the Muslim world, it has its own characteristics, and it has its own elements that has to be there to actually enhance and to present the mushaf in a proper manner. The first 2 pages are the frontispieces, and these are also called the carpet pieces. And the carpet pages are actually a design element that they become as if they are the gateway to the mushaf. They introduce the mushaf. They are very important because they will give you the design that is going to be used in the following pages in the mushaf. And it's also important because if I am producing or commissioning a mushaf, then this is going to be the reflection of my strengths. I will actually look and decide on the design before it is printed, and it becomes like the pattern's identity. Everyone has his own mushaf, especially if you are in the 14th and 15th century. If you are a sultan and you are commissioning your mushaf, you will actually put a lot of effort to produce beautiful carpet pages like these folios. The next 2 pages are the actually opening pages, the opening folios, and they incorporate the first surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha, and the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. They are also very well embellished, and the illumination reflects that of the carpet page. So now you are setting a style that you, as a patron of this Mushaf, is actually identifying. Then the next point is the surah headings. The surah headings are compartments that have the name of the surahs, and they also follow the same style, the same colors, the same repertoire of your original design. They may actually include more than just the name of the surah. They may include how many verses from Mecca or Medina and so on, but in general they are compartmentalized so that they are focused and they create the division between the chapters. The next is the page layout. It is very important when we look at a Mushaf to understand that the page layout actually organizes your text. It will create a master or a ruling that will actually give you the opportunity to place your text in the right places. Then comes the calligraphy and its articulation of the and the verse markers, as you can see, like wal-sama' wal-tariq, and then you see the verse mark. And of course, there are the margin decorations, and the margin decorations are not decorative. These are also functional, and they're very important because you have to actually, when you are creating the page layout or the architecture of the page, to have enough space in the margin to add in your margin decorations. And the margin decoration, part of them tells you if you have achieved reading or memorizing a special section like the hizb or the juz, and of course also when you need to prostrate or the sajdas decoration that we know. And finally, the art of the Mushaf also needs to have an end piece and a colophon, and in many cases they will have a dua khatma, like these ones. This is an example which has all of the components that we are talking about. But a successful printed Quran or even a handwritten Quran has to actually balance between 3 major elements. One, which is the page layout, the script style, and the illumination. When all of these are well thought of, you will produce a beautiful and a very clear Quran Mushaf, and all of these will contribute to reading, memorizing, understanding, and cherishing your Quran. So the foundation decided that they wanted to print a Quran, that Mushaf, that excels in design and typography according to historical precedents. And what does that mean? It means that I am trying to create a Quran Mushaf that is unique because it has a specific design that comes from history, becomes the continuation and development of historical designs, and still at the end it has also typology that is also based on the historical precedents but is developed so it becomes much easier to read and to use for daily recitations and so on. So they went to the Darul Qutub in Egypt because most of these monuments that you see now on the screen, if it is Sultan Sha'ban, a complex, or Al-Jay al-Yusufi, a mosque, or Sultan Hassan or Inal, all of these were inspirations for the foundation because all of the sultans and the emirs of these monuments have actually commissioned monumental Qur'ans, monumental Mushafs that were placed in Darul Qutub today. So the foundation team decided to go to Darul Qutub and to start to look into these designs. They selected 12 particular Mushafs to study. And because for them the first challenge was to actually create a beautiful design and a proper page layout. And accordingly, when they started to study these 12 Mushafs, they started to understand what do these designs are composed of. They broke down the design to small elements, and each element with a special design, whether it is geometric, floral, or calligraphic. And they started to replicate in a way or recompose the folios so that they can actually produce at the end a folio that is exact copy of the original frontispieces, for example, in here. And this is the Quran produced and commissioned by Mamluk Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad in 1334. And on your right is actually the production that this foundation team have produced. This is exactly the same folio, but with more details, clearer details. So the whole idea was to be able to understand all of these elements and transfer it from the reed pen and paper into the digital form. So now we are using the mouse and the screen, and we are digitizing, but also understanding all of these components in order to be able to produce these beautiful frontispieces. These beautiful frontispieces meant to them that they will understand each component, whether it is a geometric shamsa, like a star design, or whether it is an arabesque leaf bifurcated and running all around the surface. Accordingly, they started to compile a dictionary of designs that were popular during the 14th and 15th century in and around Egypt and Syria during the Mamluk period. This is, for example, the Quran commissioned by the Mamluk Sultan al-Zahir Barquq in 1390. And as you can see, it's different design than the one that was produced by Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad. At one point, these 12 beautiful frontispieces and the 12 Qur'ans that they have studied resulted in creating some kind of a dictionary of designs, a dictionary that understands and presents all kinds of designs. But it was not only the Mamluk repertoire that they were after. They were exposed to all of the manuscripts that were present in Darul Kutub, and accordingly they identify one more manuscript that was very important, one mushaf that was commissioned by the Persian Ilkhanid Sultan Ghiyasuddin Uljaitu. And the story of this Uljaitu's Mushaf was that Uljaitu sent it to Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad ibn Qalawun as a gift. And later on, Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad presented it to another emir of his to place in as an endowment in his complex. So this is actually the Mushaf that is now available in Darul Kutub. It was a waqf, and the foundation design team started to analyze this as well and add it to the repertoire that they were compiling. So at the end of this project, which started in 2004, they have studied all the exceptional pairs of Mamluk and Ilkhanid Quran frontispieces and some of the pages, the first folios, and they formed the basic of understanding of the Mamluk repertoire and encouraged further development in the direction of reviving the traditional sacred art of illumination in printed form. That was in 2004. And then we have a follow-up, actually, project that wanted to transfer all what they have learned from the Darul Kutub project into another project. And the other project that they have actually decided to start was a manuscript called Shama'il al-Nabi. And the Shama'il al-Nabi is a compilation of the physical appearance and description of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a manuscript. So they decided to bring all what they have learned from the Darul Qutb experience here to this manuscript of the Shama'il. And they started to actually identify something else. When they were working in Darul Qutb, they realized that there are styles. There are some of these manuscripts were actually in one style. And they realized that there was a style called the sandal style. Sandal was an illuminator in the 14th century. And he produced a lot of manuscripts. Some of them were Quran Mushafs and some other were just religious texts. And these Mushafs are now in the Care collection, in the British Library, in Darul Qutb, and even in Turkey. So they understood that there is a style that they can understand and identify and use. And then they will actually say that we are going to produce a special publication on that style. And so what was the characteristics of this sandal style? The sandal style works with a central polygon unit, and usually it will have an inscription in white color, so that the inscription will be very visible with a colored background. And also this center medallion will actually radiate to geometric compartments, create small compartments, and each compartment will be intricately filled with arabesque motifs. And as I have seen before, the outer border will be filigree, like the ones we have seen during the beginning of the 14th century. And also that it will also have the surah headings preceded by roundels, just like this one. So it is no more a surah heading, but it is a heading which is preceded by a roundel, and that is the sandal style. And also that it will actually use three main colors: gold, blue, and turquoise if possible, but red for sure. And the leaves, the arabesque leaves, will have an inner dot. That is a very particular style produced during the first quarter of the 14th century, and the design team realized that this is actually a style that is prevalent during this period, and that's why they wanted to make sure that they understand it and replicate it. And so at that stage, they have understood all of the vocabulary that was necessary to create a design. So the design element was no more a challenge. The next challenge was the calligraphy. So what calligraphy will they use? How will they transfer the calligraphy into a very clear and legible and beautiful font? So they actually, after they researched all of the typesets that were available very early on, they identify a font that already had a typeface and that was developed in 1924 and later on developed more in 1932 for the production of King Fuad's edition of the Quran. This typeset was written by a renowned calligrapher at the advent of the 20th century, and his name was Al-Rifai. And they actually understood that this calligraphy and this typeset is very important because it actually helps the reader to read properly, to understand properly, to actually use it for tajweed at one point. And so accordingly, there were a lot of articulations and a lot of ligatures that needed to be actually added and introduced. The first typeset, which is Fuad 200 as they call it, was the basic one. And this typeset was developed later on by the design team to become Fuad the 3rd edition and later the 4th edition. And in the process, they started to understand that at the beginning, when we used to have printed Qur'ans long time ago, the typesets were very basic, and some of them were not clear, and some of them were not correct, and that also resulted in a lot of mistakes, especially in reading and understanding the Holy Book. And accordingly, when they started to look at the Fuad font, the whole idea was not to change the Fuad font from 2nd version to 3rd version, but to introduce objects or things that can help and can create visually a more aesthetic appear to the script. So it is really in a way that you can see that, for example, Al-Asr from the Fuad 2nd edition to the 4th edition, we have an elongation in the Sad, and that is what they call actually the Qashida. So they started to introduce this spacing in the text because they felt that it is very important to come up with a text that is comfortable, that looks fine, that's easy to read, and that is correct. And accordingly, they use these qasidas. And then in 2008, they decided to produce another publication, which is to take all of what they have learned, all of the experience that they have gained through all of these phases into one manuscript, one juz of the Quran, and that is of course juz amma. And that is in 2008 they thought to produce it, and to produce it digitally, of course. So all of this have now, and we have accumulated a whole group of repertoires and designs that I was able to bring in and to use in this juz. The first part of the juz, which is the frontispieces, and you will be able to see it here on the table as well, they were almost replicating the Ul-Jay-2 Quran. So the whole idea is that, okay, I have a sample that I can use. Why not? Let us use that and let's see how it can develop in a beautiful juz amma. But then the next folios were the opening pages. And here is when we had to actually rely on the vocabulary that we have already accumulated. So the surah headings became, each surah heading became on its own an outstanding piece of art. They actually devised and they used all of the vocabulary that I have accumulated earlier into these beautiful surah headings. Each surah heading is different. They have introduced different colors. They have actually all used the basic design elements coming from our history into the modern world. And also they introduced the medallions that actually precedes the surah headings, and each medallion, as you can tell, had a different design. In a way, because they have put a lot of effort in transferring these designs into a digital form, they were able to reuse them in a proper way, and because the vocabulary is correct, the language of these designs became historically correct. And this is what we call the development and continuation of Islamic art. Also, as I say, each one of these margin decoration becomes in itself a piece of art. They are not the same, as you can tell. One, the arabesque design is in gold, the other, the arabesque leaf, and the threads are in different colors, in blue, and so on. And especially when they come to the colophon, when they started to produce a colophon, they started to orchestrate it in a way that it will enhance all of the idea of a colophon. What does a colophon need to have? Not only the text, but a design. So they created this spiral design. They embedded in it the small leaves, and the leaves started to grow naturally, as if it is an organic object, as if it is an organic development. But the whole idea is that all of this done bit by bit. So the arabesque leaf is one leaf that is produced in different layers in the computer, in the software, and then they start to use them. Some of them they look right, some of them they look toward the left, some of them are bifurcated, some of them are not, and in each one of them they had to take their time to place them correctly in the spiral, so in order to come up at the end with this beautiful spiral colophon. So it did take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of trials in order to come up with the most beautiful design. But because all of these elements were already there and we were free to use them to produce aesthetically a beautiful manuscript. Also, when we talk about the frontispieces and the endispieces, they started to orchestrate it in a way that they can identify these units and they can introduce it into that design. And each one of these units can be filled with different colors, with different motifs, with different arabesque scrolls, all to produce this beautiful unit. And that actually led to the production of the Quran Mushaf that I am talking today about, which is the Mushaf of the Thesaurus Islamicus Foundation. And when we look at this beautiful Quran, it is an exquisite work. The design is very well articulated, and the attention to detail is really outstanding. All of this is original design, not a copy of what was there before. They use all of these elements to recreate a mushaf, but on a different level. They really wanted to produce a mushaf that was very pleasing to the eye. This is the opening pages, and as you can see, even the margin decoration became a piece of art on themselves. The surah headings and the margin decoration, the hizb and the juz, and the surah heading and the small roundel next to it, all of these were actually original. Each one was done for this particular surah, rather than just replicating the surah headings and the designs. All of these were carefully, if you look closely, each one of the surah heading is different, and each one of the margin decoration is different. When we look total on the margin decoration as those ones for the hizb, you can tell they have extracted the designs from the historical mushafs of Darul Qutub, and they are now free to use them in a way to produce beautiful compositions. It is all about a composition, how to come up with a composition. Do we need to just replicate? No, we can come up with a design, a composition for each one piece, and they can actually stand on their own. And that's why even in the Sajda teardrop medallion, you can tell the amount of time and effort that each one of these actually took. They were all, in a way, pieces of art that can be used later on or developed on. And especially the final end piece became also a beautiful piece of art. And the khatma took another toll, became like a shamsa, like a sunburst, with the khatma inside of it. they have actually produced over 114 surah headings. And they chose the best out of them. Each one was different. Each one was composed with original and correct terminology, if I can say. These are the terms, these are the vocabulary that they extracted out of the folios, and they produced it here. So the page became a beautiful page, very clear, very easy to read, very well. And because the page was very important, so they actually relied on the number of words and the number of lines in each surah, and they relied on the ones that were produced in Al-Madinah, the Mushaf of Al-Madinah, because this way anyone who is reading will be able to follow. I have reached this hizb, and we will have the same text. Every piece of work is an art piece, and that can be actually used and reused and developed. But today, I actually invite you to see that we can actually produce a lot of different designs, and we can actually break the monotonousness of these frontispieces or the end pieces. We give the artist and the designer the liberty to use the authentic designs into new designs and to have no limitation. Perhaps not only in Quran Mushafs, but in all of the publications, the religious manuscripts that are produced today. And in the market, you will be able to see that if they produce Quran Mushafs with the same surah headings, one after the other, in this Mushaf, they have not done that. They have put the effort to produce an outstanding piece of art that pleases you and that is worthy of the beauty of the holy word. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite you to actually have a look at the actual Mushaf that they have produced in the foundation. This is one of it, and this is the frontispieces that I was looking at. This is also another version of the Quran Mushaf that was produced for the Al-Azhar, and as you can tell, all of this is produced and printed with pure colors. This is not the combination of colors to produce. No, this is actually 4 real colors: gold, blue, red, and white. And the whole idea, this one is actually produced in 3 colors, but as you can see, each surah heading, each shamsa, each margin decoration is very different from the other. And the text is written in gold. Beautiful, beautiful publication, but also beautiful because it really is a pleasure to hold and to use and to be proud of. Our sultans and emirs in the Mamluk, Persian, and Ottoman eras, they all produced Qur'ans. They were themselves calligraphers and illuminators. So why are we today not doing the same? Why aren't we putting a lot of effort in the production of our Mushafs? And these are our treasure. This is what we are going to show the world. And as they did long time ago, this foundation actually decided to do the same today, digitally. Change from the reed, pen, and paper into a monitor and a screen and digitally production. And the digital production created for us beautiful collection of these small elements that I can today use anywhere as I wish. And I can give the liberty to my designers to actually enjoy. That's why we felt that it was worth talking about these publications today. today, because it does actually bring what was there long time ago, and the philosophy of production of the Quran Mushafs into today's technology. Use the technology to enhance, to make it even better. They didn't have actually technology, and I remember the calligrapher who wrote the Quran for the king. It took him 6 months to pen the Quran and 8 months to illuminate it. Today, I can actually, with technology, shorten this period and produce outstanding results as well. So that's why we actually invite you to use technology in the printing of the Mushaf, but in a way that it is authentic to our traditions and heritage. Also on the tables are the 12 frontispieces that we have actually replicated from the Darul Kutub examples. And as you can see, they are very highly produced and printed, each one with a certificate of authenticity, and the certificate would say that they have only produced 225 copies of this. This is exclusive, and it will show you the copy, but at the end it will give you a small history. What is this? The original of this was produced for the Sultan Sha'ban, for the endowment of the mosque and complex of Sultan Sha'ban in Egypt. So as you can see, these are the transformation of the original old Mushaf produced in and still present in Darul Kutub, but in digital form. And of course, all of what have been lost all through the time is now actually corrected in a digital form. And that is the original colors. So the sultans in the 14th century would have actually wanted to see their monumental Mushaf in that size and in that color. Today, they are, of course, dilapidated a bit, and accordingly, what we have produced here digitally is the philosophy of these sultans at that point. They are very finely printed, and they will become examples of any other mushafs that we are talking about or that we are actually investigating. The vocabulary that I am talking about, the language that this institution have produced is all digital, and you can actually work around and recreate all what you need, and it becomes a new form of art, and it is very important to acknowledge it and to actually promote it. And this is actually what we wanted to present today. Please have the liberty to look at them. They are beautiful. We have also another set on the other side, and they are some of the outstanding mushafs. Okay.
It's really an excellent work. Many years it took you and the group
yes.
to produce fascinating, really. It's really a success. But let me ask you, what is the minimum size, the sizable Quran that can we read in the mosque?
This is a very good question, because we have actually miniature Qurans, and people who use the miniature Qurans, who are like thumbnail Qurans.
It's like the Mushaf that we use in our houses and in the mosque all over the world. Can it be produced?
That size?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a monumental size. And long time ago, the sultans had this rihal big, and that was the size of the manuscript they wanted to produce. It's not our style today, but it's okay. All of these can actually come to a smaller versions, because it is digitally there. I can play with the size. I can enlarge it and I can reduce it. So So all of this can be done because it is digital, because it is there. All of it is there. The size is a 20 centimeters actually size. That is the most comfortable. That is what when we go to the haram, that we will actually be able to take for free. But what I was trying to say is that even the small miniature Qur'ans were embellished, were illuminated. And because the people, when they kept it for a reason or another, they have already memorized the Qur'an. So for them, it is just for barakah, as they call it.
How long did it take to produce the blue Mushaf?
Actually, all in all, it took 20 years. 20 years to be able to produce this concept of a Mushaf that takes from the heritage and to produce it digitally in the modern world.
There's only one copy?
No, there are more than one copy. The first one has been presented to Al-Azhar. And in Al-Azhar, the Sheikh Al-Azhar, Sheikh Tayyib, is actually presenting it, and we understand that he presented it even to the president, because he cherished this publication. But the other publication, the smaller one, the foundation's publication, the Mushaf, is now being produced, actually. So no, it's not going to be one single unit. No, they actually will be able to produce in several editions. Some large, some smaller, because it is easy to work with. Available. Exactly. That is the whole idea. If the public can acquire it, the public will actually cherish it, and they will have it as a coffee table, actually, Mushaf, rather than the Mushaf that we have at home. Go back home and look at your Mushafs. When you look at this, you will realize the difference, and you would want to acquire this kind of Mushaf. No, to put beside your sijada.
Publish a dictionary for all the ornaments that exist?
Very good question, very good question. This is exactly what the foundation should do, right? Is that maybe this is what we should actually tell the foundation. After all of this work, come up with this dictionary, with this visual repertoire. Yeah.
Publication would let you appreciate more what you have when you know the process, the details of the designs, the illuminations, the meaning. So you appreciate the
Exactly, exactly. It will actually give a chance for people to understand more. And even if they produce this dictionary, they can have with it perhaps an application that you can actually download all of these, and then you can use them and so on. Of course, each leaf, each arabesque leaf is actually not just a leaf, but it is a series of vector lines. And it really took them so long to produce all types and kinds of articulation of this leaf. So yes, all of this work should be, on the table.
should be online. On the
Should be.
website.
Yes, not a bad idea. We will tell them that.
Yes.
I once learned that not all houses could actually do the print of Quran. So what are the limits around the world? Are there certain centers that could print Quran?
Usually in Egypt, if you want to print a Quran, you have to take the consent of the Azhar. But if the Azhar gives you the consent, you can actually come up with ISBN number, and yes, it's not a problem. The problem is that after you actually produce it, you have to send it back for them to verify that it is correct. Exactly. And they take some time, because they will go through every word and every articulation so that they are sure that it is correct. Also, they do, because along the years there were a lot of mistakes, and a lot of Mushafs were actually retrieved back. Yes, of course. Also, I know, in Malaysia, they do that. It has to actually be cleared by the...
Could come with a work?
Yes.
And ask for permission?
Yes, but it will go through the process.
Yes, of
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, and it becomes like an endowment or like a gift, or yes, it can be.
Thank you.
Sure.